All right. Cool. Sweet. Okay. So we're recording now. So just again to give everybody a little heads up on the call today. Today is part 2 of summer events. Today is May 4th, and may the 4th be with you, as well as everyone who is anywhere in the geek world has said multiple times. Again, I'd like to say happy birthday to my cat Marco, who is celebrating his first birthday today after we rescued him 1 year ago from the Muncie Humane Shelter. So here's to Marco. Okay, so today's call, summer events. That's right. And we'll, again, we were all pushing to this early May for a lot of us to talk about kind of our camp decisions. I know a lot of us have made camp decisions, but again, that's why this conversation is called summer events, because we're not only talking about camp, we're talking about lots of other summer things that are on the docket. So we'll talk about that. And then also, like I said, a lot of states have done some reentry. They're starting to open up. And so we can have some of those conversation as well. So, but before we do that, again, the format for the call, we'll do some encouragement, some collaboration, just some prayer time. But let's just open it up to just share some cool stories. Like, what's been working for you? What are you most excited about right now? What's gone well? And it can be even a story from a couple weeks ago. Maybe it's personal, whatever. Like, what's been going well the last several weeks? What's working for you? What's been good?
I'll go ahead and start. Um, One thing we experimented in April about how to connect with families during our online platform. And so
Can you
we
tell
started
everybody
off,
where you're at one more time?
yes, Travis Ward, New Hope in Williston, North Dakota, and family ministry pastor. And so we started online in regards to coming up with different activities. Week one, we played I Spy with the families, and then we created a bingo. And then week three, we came back with a word scramble where we just took some of the pastor's words and scrambled them up. And we realized that we were going to run out of ideas pretty quickly. And so our children's pastor came up with sermon notes for kids. And so what we've decided to do was sermon notes for kids. Families can download those weekly, and we have gone to every other week doing the in-service activity, rotating back through I Spy, bingo, word scramble, but then each week having the kids' notes.
That's super cool. And so that's specifically for Sunday morning you've been doing that?
Yep, that is
That's cool.
for Sunday mornings. For Mondays, we've called them family nights, and we, as others may utilize too, through the Orange Ministry, they provide the videos for the different age groups, preschool, elementary, and then preteen, and we post those along with parent cues on our family ministry Facebook group, to where families can download the classes that they need. So
Cool. That's awesome, man. That's a cool idea. Somebody else, what's been working for you? What are you encouraged by?
Hello, this is Angela Amrine. How you doing? Are you there? Are you there? Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, we can hear you. You're good. You're great.
Oh, so good. I'm in Kentwood, Michigan. And one of the things that we've been doing is using this time as a chance for people to be able to share their stories. And so instead of in our Zoom youth group times that we've been doing weekly, instead of us having someone teach a sermon over Zoom, which can feel odd sometimes, we have a different student or leader pre-record part of their God story. And it could be anything. It could be when they first met Jesus. It could be last week when they were worried about the coronavirus, wherever it was, wherever God met them and how God met them. Yeah. I have them record it, and then we play it, and then they go to breakout rooms and discuss it for a few minutes. And I just feel like it's been a really good way for us to be just that much more personal and to allow people to share their stories.
It's good.
Yeah, that's been going really well. We created a YouTube channel that we've been just trying to put a lot of content out. Again, like I've been doing one-on-one interviews with students, and then we post those, and so that's been also a lot of fun. I'm just trying to make it personal, and I think even just going back to basics of making phone calls to kids, you
Right.
know, without some big agenda, without having some big event to invite them to, you know, just
Yeah.
calling them to pray for them and to listen to them has been very good for us in our ministry.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I've seen some kids ministries too that have been doing the similar things with like having kids share their stories too, which has been a really neat thing, you know, because normally we think of like that. Sometimes it's easy to think of that testimony time just for students or older kids or whatever, but it's been cool to see some churches even doing that in kids ministry, which is always hilarious because you never know what you're going to get. So it's just a blast. So that's cool. Somebody else, what's been working for you? What are you encouraged by? What's been good for you the last couple weeks? Everybody's so tired today. Zach McConnell, tell me a good story. What's been going on up your woods, your neck of the woods, man, or your rodeo
Thanks.
stable?
My stable. Hey, I'm Zach. I am
Arena. Forgive me, Arena. I eventually got there. Your Arena.
Thank you.
You're
From
welcome.
Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So this is kind of a cool, unexpected story. We've been doing our youth group through YouTube. We've been doing it kind of like a Sports Center, ESPN, and a Jimmy Fallon combination show. So there's a lot of pre-recorded segments. There's a talk with a grad type of things. But what we didn't expect is, number one, it's no longer geared towards our student ministries. It's become a very family come together at the TV night, and
Cool.
families are interacting. But the second thing that I really didn't expect is it's now reaching outside of our Sioux Falls community. And a little bit of a transparent background story for me is my family's not Christians. They live in Fishers, Indiana, and they've never really accepted Christianity. And last week, my sister, she just graduated high school, was just curious what I had done, and I was able to open the door for the gospel, which that made me overwhelmed after service.
Cool,
and I'm
man.
just like, that's never happened. I never thought God could work in that way. But so that's what I'm selfishly
cool.
celebrating.
No, that's not selfish at all, bro. That's super awesome. That's incredible. That's great.
I mean, if I can jump on again, to
Do
brag
it.
about students, I mean, we've done kind of the same thing as Zach mentioned. Ours is kind of a talk show. We pre-record. We use YouTube Premiere where we can chat with our students as they are watching the service. And one thing that we have done is with this being different for the senior class, we have tried to bring in our seniors to where they can
Cool.
participate in the service somehow.
That's
We
great.
have had office chair racing where we took office chairs and they just raced around the lobby. We did chariot races where they pulled each other on blankets. We did a peep eating contest. And so it's just to try to highlight the seniors because they're kind of forgotten. Last week we encouraged and had a good group of seniors jump on. It's a gentleman, and I may butcher his name, Gerald Fadomi. He is an orange specialist out of Atlanta, and he's offering senior sessions where he goes through an hour of a Zoom meeting and talks about adversity, what's next, and just really honing in on conversations for seniors. And I got
That's
text
awesome.
messages back about thank you for offering this for us, setting it up. And so those are some things that's taking place in student ministry.
So cool, man. That's awesome. Charlie, tell us about Never Too Young, man. That was pretty. I caught that, man. That was such a cool thing, man. Especially after living pandemic life here, man. What a great pivot, man.
It was cool, like connecting. It's kind of funny. Matt Hare is now overall middle school at Saddleback, and Matt. I remember speaking at Indiana Central camp when it was Indiana Central, and I went to pray with this kid at the altar. He was a middle school kid, and it was my son Nick. And then next to him was one of the high school kids named Matt. And then a couple years later, Matt was at IWU and jumped in there in ministry, jumped in at JC Body Shop. What's up, Matt Beck? Good times. So you had Matt in the mix and Southland, and we brought in a bunch of different churches. But what was crazy, Zach, is like the numbers were great, but they hung in. Like the average, cool. I think still is like 14.5 minutes.
Wow,
for an online service. 88% of everybody who logged in stayed for the entire time, which is shocking. Yeah, I mean, Fusion, it was about the national average. So you had people popping in and popping out, but give it up to middle school students for hanging out, and the chat on the right side, we could not keep up with it. I mean, so much chatter. And so they jumped into the interactive activities, like you guys have said, using students to share, their heart and their passion, everything that we did, we try to use as a template for the summer. So if a camp or a church or a group needs a format, like even the intro, we experimented with an intro video. And it might've been odd. It's like, why is everyone saying I love, Never Too Young? That was an example. So if a church or organization wants to use that resource, we can
you tell everybody what you did with that intro? Just like the quick version of what it was.
So we just recorded tons of people just saying hi, so that when we jumped into it, I can say all those people that you saw are praying for you right now. They're actually on the chat. They're a part of this, so you can talk to them as this event continues. And so it put a bunch of faces. So we had a chance in a 3-minute video to highlight 20 people. And so that gave a lot of context to who's a part of the leadership.
Cool. And
so you just, it was just these 10-second clips, that got a lot of people FaceTime, so they could be, a name, could be recognized with a face that they saw earlier.
That's great.
And it was just an idea, like when we kept on thinking, what could we offer to the church? Well, one way is to get all of your people visible on some of these chats, or these events or these streams or whatever they are. And so the whole thing was an example of what we're going to just offer up for free out to anybody who chooses to use it all June. I mean, we've got the studio set up. We got a worship band ready to roll. That's the summer team. We got Air Rally ready to go. We could partner with anybody on content. They want to use their own speaker. They can record their own speaker, all the testimonies, the interactive piece with the games, or the interactive elements. People responded well. I mean, as good as they were, sometimes, this one's getting a little bit long. For me, I felt, it's getting too long, except for the students never lost interest.
It's interesting.
And so it was really encouraging. The greatest thing ever was sharing Christ with people online during the chat, and the fact that the middle school students stayed the entire time.
It's cool.
And that was, they set the bar.
That's so cool.
The old people need to learn from some middle school kids, man. They were engaged. So we loved it, man. It was a great time. It's so cool having these resources. I mean, we got all, the studio and the cameras and all this tech to make it like really amazing. So we just want to use it. That's why it's all free.
Yeah. So just to remind everybody, a couple different things. One is like, if any of that stuff is helpful for you to work with Charlie to craft kind of your own summer experience, email Charlie, because they've got teams ready, studio ready, all those types of things. So let's just, maybe, I mean, the reality is not all of our churches are super equipped with technology to be able to do what we would prefer to do. And man, just shoot Charlie an email and connect with him about what that might be able to look like. They've got teams, they've got all those resources that they're still doing this summer. And then a couple things I want to highlight, and then we can jump into some collaboration time, is I hope you're hearing this theme. You know, it was probably 6 weeks ago. We had this conversation of moving from connection to from moving from content to engagement, right? And like what has been so encouraging for me to hear these last 5 or 6 weeks is all the little micro shifts that you all are making to promote engagement. And that's why people are staying on longer, right? Like it's not just this content that we're just pumping out, but we're actually engaging our people and creating this cross conversation back and forth. So just want to continue to encourage you guys with that. It's just a smart strategy to push that type of engagement versus just, you know, hey, I'm going to create this story or create this or that or whatever. So, okay, let's talk about summer stuff. So we had talked about, hey, May 1st seems to be a really interesting date. Stephen Martin, I'm going to put you on the spot, man, to get our conversation rolling. You guys were one of the ones that were kind of in a holding pattern. Where are you guys at now with stuff? What's it looking out west, man? Is it still, you guys still rocking and rolling, or what's stuff look like?
Yeah, as of right now, things are still, we haven't canceled camp. So as of right now, I've been talking to Zach and kind of working my way around you know, I need to talk to Travis, and been talking to some of the other youth pastors in our district and talking.
You guys host in South Dakota, just for so everybody have some context.
Yep. And South Dakota is wide open. Like, I mean, they're not necessarily on the local level. They might still have some restrictions and social distancing, but on the state level, not so much. Yeah, there's just a couple more conversations. I was really waiting for this one too, just to kind of hear what other people are doing across the country. Because the thing is like parts of South Dakota, Sioux Falls has been impacted far greater than we have, right. You know, and in Wyoming, where I am, and even, you know, Rapid City in South Dakota, it's maybe not as bad. So camp's definitely going to look different. I think I'm fully committed to the fact that it is not going to be the level of production that we put out every year. I think. Can you speak
into some of those differences that you're already anticipating? Because I think that's a helpful side of this conversation too.
Yeah.
It's like, what are a few of those things that you're like, we know that these 1, 2, 3 things, I mean, I know you probably got a list of 20, but what are those top few that you're like, hey, I know this is going to look different?
Right. Some of it is going to be, you know, just things like set design and, you know, band, things like that. We're going to have probably fewer people because of just the amount of people that can actually gather at the camp. Some of the activities that we normally do, you know, Zach is the master of our rec here in this conversation, and he does an amazing job. But a lot of the things that we might normally do, we probably won't be able to do just because of the mass of students and integration of people being close to each other and all that stuff. So in a lot of ways, it's gonna, if you think about maybe a step down from like camp to retreat kind of thing, as far as you know, everything from budget to even the amount of energy, right, you know, that's involved in every activity, or, you know, and all those things. I don't know. We'll try to make it as best we can, but.
Are you guys anticipating, like, with the social distancing stuff, are you guys making changes to cabins and food and those types of things? Is that being stipulated yet by South Dakota? Or are you guys, like, how are you guys processing? Because that's like sleeping and food are and main sessions are kind of the three main, rather. That was really good counting. You're welcome. The 3 main areas that I'm hearing a lot of discussion on. Like, where are you guys at with, and I'll say them, with food, right, with sleeping, and then with main sessions?
So right now, the last that I heard was that fewer number of students in cabins, okay, so that each bed can be 6 feet apart from each other. Okay. Which ultimately for us means fewer students on camp.
Got it.
Fewer students on the campground.
Because you guys don't have like an abundance of cabins. So for you guys are just knowing that your threshold's just going to have, like,
Right. So
threshold's just
you
gonna
might go
be-
from 300 to 150 as far as what the camp can actually hold.
Got you.
The camp has made modifications as far as food prep and food
Okay.
distribution. So they've put up like shields and plexiglass shields and things like that.
Okay.
It'd also probably be the process of moving students through for meals will change and be a
And
little bit
line up
different.
and all that stuff.
Yep. It might be a team-based thing, over a longer period of time. I don't know. And then rally. So like our students, the second, like a IWU band or whatever starts playing, boom, they rush forward. Everybody, you get 100 students gathered together right up at the front. And they're jumping and all that stuff. Like that's a part of camp, And so what that's going to look like if for us to inhibit them, I don't know how that'll go, but I do know that they're going to be soft. Like students are going to be ready and they're going to be, willing to be ministered to and excited to just be out and be in that atmosphere and environment. So I think they're going to be very flexible with us if we have camp and very forgiving of the changes that we have to make for us, because they love it so much.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not going to be the same as it has been. And that's
really helpful. That's awesome. Yeah, and if anybody is looking for like camp programming stuff, Zach McConnell truly is a genius when it comes to this stuff. Still praying you get on Survival, buddy. Just still waiting for Survivor to come through, man. But all joking aside, Zach is a master at programming with camp stuff. So Joel Higginbotham, bro, where are you guys at? Any new update with you guys?
Our camp already every year has a kids camp, a teen camp, and a family camp. And what we've done this year is our kids camp and our teen camp, we are canceling, and we're suggesting to everyone who would normally come to one of those to come as a family to the family camp. And so during family camp, we'll have some beefed up teen programming. We normally have teen programming, but we're going to beef it up a little bit. Same with kids camp. But we're going to lean heavy into programming small groups of people doing things throughout the week rather than large everybody together type stuff. But what that allows for us is we already don't have a lot of space to house people, but this allows us to not have to worry about the housing and food stuff except for our staff and those who are volunteers that week. Every kid and every teen that comes is coming with their family, is eating with their family, is being housed with their family in RVs throughout the campground. And that actually provides us a lot more space to be able to do that sort of a thing. Our 5 or so years ago was the heyday for our family camp. And about 5 years ago, our teen camp had 60 or less teens at it. And our family camp had 150 teens at it. And so we already have a bigger capacity for doing that. They've evened out since then. But this year we're just leaning more into our family camp to be able to do everything. And so we'll have large games where everybody's big spread out in a field, and then some like archery or fishing or canoeing or stuff like that around the campground for smaller groups of people around the week.
Great. And for those who are wondering, Joel's in East Michigan area. It's GLR now, but their camp is in East Michigan. Somebody else who's kind of running a camp or a VBS or something like that. Matt, go for it, brother.
So our governor came out with like a 3-phase process.
Remind everybody where you're at.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm Matt Blackford. I'm up in Maine.
Thank you, brother.
Probably as far east as you can go in Maine. So our governor came out with a 3-phase process, and like when she announced it, the second phase, she's like camps. Like she's made some mention about camps being reopened, and of course me and the other guy who directed it got like phone calls like crazy from parents saying, "Are you still doing it?" But then when we looked into the rules, we pretty much have to climb a mountain to be able to run camp. Like we had a rule where you have to have 2 counselors in a cabin, plus you could only have 2 or 3 students in that cabin. And we're a smaller camp in the sense where like all our beds are nailed to the wall. And so we
the literally built in.
Yeah, they are. And so we can't really move stuff.
Gotcha.
And so there's a 90% chance we're going to have to cancel. We haven't made the decision. We're going to meet Monday as a board and kind of decide that, because there's a lot of like just the whole sanitizing if something happens. So it's like she made it seem like we could have camp, but with the rules that are put in place, it's pretty much impossible is what we're finding. And so we're at that point where, you know, and plus with the border not being opened up either,
Right.
we have a speaker coming from Canada, and he probably won't be able to come over, and a lot of stuff like that. So it's looking more towards the cancellation process. And we're in May, end of April is when she came out with that 3-phase process.
Okay.
But I like the idea too about the family camp kind of beefing that up, because we do a
Yeah, it's
kids
a clever
camp,
idea.
2 teens camp, and then a family camp at the end of August. So that in August is like phase 3. And so we might be able to do something with that. So that was good. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Somebody else who's leading camp, VBS, something like it. Just any. I mean, it just open it up here. Anybody else who's? What are you doing? What are you thinking?
So I am heading up. I'm in North Carolina, NC West, and I am the kids camp director this year. Great time to like take over that role.
Congratulations! You get to lead during a pandemic.
It's great. But we opened registration last week. We'd kind of put it off a little bit, but felt like we should go ahead. Our camp is not until the last week in July. And so we kind of have had this cushion of let's get a little bit closer and just kind of see where we're at. North Carolina is supposed to kind of enter into phase 1 like next week. And so like best case scenario, we may be out of all of the phases by the time the end of July hits. But with the regulations and stuff, we've just had a lot of hurdles of figuring out like logistically, like do we have the money to be able to pay for the sanitation things that we would need to be able to actually have camp? Because the campground we're using is owned by a different denomination, and they've canceled all of their camps for the summer. And so they are not actually paying for any of those things because they're not having camp. So it would basically fall on us. And so that's been a big challenge. And a lot of that's kind of come up in the last, like since we opened registration, we have found out more information about that. And so for us, it wasn't looking great even when we opened registration. We were just prayerful and optimistic and like trying to give hope. But we're just going to continue having conversations, and we're planning a camp that may just happen next year. But one of the alternatives we've thought about is if we can't have a camp in July, doing some sort of day thing on a Saturday in the fall. And so that way, like letting it be pushed back a little bit, because North Carolina, because of where we're at, we could find an area that's a little bit more central for everyone, where a Saturday, like whole day thing isn't impossible. And so we're not really sure what that looks like, but might provide an opportunity for the kids across the district to be able to come together for something. So that's kind of where we're at in that process.
Super helpful. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of people that come up with that contingency too, of like, hey, if we can't do camp, like what does something potentially in the fall look like? And then Elizabeth, I'm gonna put you on the spot because I'm not seeing anybody else on the call that might know. And if you don't, it's really cool. Do you know what's going on with Victory Mountain? Have you heard any update from Victory Mountain crew? Which would be that's like basically youth camp for NC East, NC West, for everybody who's not familiar.
I know that NC East has canceled or postponed or whatever youth camp completely. I know that
in June.
The last I heard was the jury was still out on their kids camp. Their kids camp happens the last 2 weeks in July. And the jury's still out on our youth camps, which are the first 2 weeks in July. So I think I think at this point, all of our June camps have been canceled, and that they're trying to figure out what July camps look like. So.
Cool. Thanks so much. Somebody else.
Hey, this is Angela Spangler. I am in, my camp is Fairmount Camp in Fairmount, Indiana. And we made the decision on Saturday based on the information that came out from the governor here in Indiana on Friday that we should be entering stage 4 in mid-June, and then stage 5 in early July. And those stages stage 4 opens things up to groups of 250. And then once we get to 4th of July, it's supposed to be open completely. So that kind of gave us a little bit of wiggle room. Historically, we have a week of junior high camp and a week of senior high camp, both in the month of June. So what we're doing this year is we will combine those 2 weeks, and we've moved them to June 28th. And so that's kind of our plan for now, knowing that everything we do is subject to change. Because one of the big questions we have is, what is social distancing? You know, what are they going to come out with that? You know, because as they open things up and they allow for other venues, you know, how are you going to, once they start opening sports events, how's social distancing supposed to work with that? So I think they're just going to start loosening up some of those guidelines, which is what we're, fingers crossed, we'll do our best. The American Camping Association, they have been putting out like an outline of what they expect camps to do. And they have said that that guidance is supposed to come out by the middle of May. So I will use that guidance along with the CDC to really determine what camp has to look like for us. And then our kids camp, it's slated for like, I think it's like middle of July. And because it's after that stage 5 opens, our plan is to leave that. We'll let the kids camp stay where it's at. And then our big camp, which is family camp, is the last full week in July. So our plan is to go forward with those, assuming that nothing else happens kind of in the meantime. But even in the stages, the governor still has that, you know, verbiage, you know, follow the CDC social distancing guidelines. And, you know, like others have said, how do you handle worship service with a bunch of teenagers and social distancing? Because if we take that away from them, you know, I don't know that that's in any of our best interest, you know. So that social distancing thing is still a big problem for us. But, you know, that's kind of our plan. That's where we've kind of moved things. And it just helps to know that there is a plan now and that we can go forward and do our best to plan something.
Could you post you mentioned the American Camping Association stuff. Could you post a link to that in the chat for us? Would that be, because then that way, if anybody else is wanting to pull those guidelines, they can pull that. Well, I know you said it's not out yet, but I think that'd be helpful for all of us for sure. That's super helpful. Angela, thank you. Yeah, because I mean, I'm even hearing rumblings, you know, talking about some of these CDC guidelines. I'm hearing rumblings of, you know, masks being required and all this kind of stuff. I'm sure everybody is too. I know I'm not in isolation on those things, but it is interesting as we think about that. What are you guys hearing from parents? Because it's one thing that we're hearing, you know, it's one thing for us to plan operationally. It's one thing for us to, and we talked a little bit about this a couple weeks ago of like that internal dialogue that we can control as leaders. Like, okay, this is what I know I need to do to get camp ready. I know, you know, sure, I've got these guidelines. I've got the, you know, all this operational stuff, but there's a lot of psychology involved in this right now, and art. It's both science and art. We talk a lot about the science, and we've talked a lot about the science on these calls. I'd love to talk a little bit about the art of how we're interacting with parents and what we're learning about parents right now, how we're caring for them when it comes to this, like sending my kid away to camp for multiple nights with so much. Like, what are you, like, Ian, I'm going to put you on the spot, brother, because you've got, you know, you've got older kids, and I just appreciate your wisdom. Like, what things are you hearing? Ian's in Colorado, but like, what things are you've also done ministry all over the country too. So I just feel like you're such a great resource for a question like this to get us started, brother. Like, get us started.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, you know, region to region. Like, obviously here in Colorado is going to be much different because it's not just CDC guidelines, but we're also held by like our local guidelines too. Right. So like, even with camp stuff, when they're like, how do you test those who are staffed and stuff like that? So how are you actually COVID testing? Like, people who are running, you know, like our camp's going to have the ability to like test those in the kitchen and those who are doing different things. So they're actually saying, like, our governor has already said, so Colorado's unique and different. Again, Wild West Wesleyans out here. But, you know, I'd say like probably the biggest thing with parents is like, yeah, that's my hardest thing to get a pulse with. I think it's going to take some polls. It's going to take us really navigating relationally, not just the students, but the parents. Like, so we are under the Safer at Home, so we can technically gather with 10 right now currently, and so we actually put out, hey, if you want to do watch parties and stuff like that. And we were actually I was surprised how much kickback we got, mostly from some. Like, so we're kind of finding both. So we find some that are like, hey, we'll get together with this family and play in the backyard, but I'm not sure that they're ready to send their kids to camp yet. I don't necessarily know that I have a pulse there, but I do know, like, I think once things tip, I think it's going to be much easier. Once you start seeing venues where hundreds of people gather, it may be easier. If you know your church and like what I think you're just going to have to really know your people, ask some questions, take some polls. Because it's another thing to say, hey, we normally take 50 or 70 kids to camp, but now we're taking 6. Was that a marketing issue that we did, or was it COVID-19 or the summer? And so I think that's the biggest thing too. And obviously, obviously Indiana's got a great 5-step thing. As a matter of fact, I sent that to our staff when I saw Mark Gorvet post that the other day, because there's hope for us out here in Colorado, because we're going to learn from everything that you guys do out there wrong, right? So, so it'll just be easier. So I just think, again, how, like, I would probably find those parents who you're super close with, who would sign their kids up for camp. I would have honest dialogue with them, because if they're not going to sign their kids up and send them, then I think you're going to have the hardest time doing it. So I'm totally for camp. I want people to hear that. Like, we're trying to figure out a way to do that. We would normally be in Sioux Falls with NTS, and that's obviously not going to happen this summer, but we're just trying to figure out those ways too. So I think, again, once society trips, I think it's going to get a little bit easier. I would say this, I tend to be super optimistic. I tend to be kind of like, again, glass is half full, not half empty. And so for me, I would be one of the early adopters to most things. But I think you just got to find your church out. What I find is the church culture, just depends on your church culture and the culture you live in too, whether or not they're going to be early adopters to this or whether they're not. So
that's really helpful.
Go on about different things. But if you didn't, Zach, I'm assuming you saw it too, Kevin Meyer's statement yesterday too about when
I did.
I think that's a big thing.
Can you share it with everybody, just because I think it's helpful, because it was interesting to hear his observation.
He had a really quick thought, and I didn't actually watch the service to verify it, but he just said, we'll come back to church. Now, again, this is a mega church when kids can socially distance 6 feet apart. So like, he was basically just kind of saying, like, until, again, how do you, like, camp could be great alternative, but if you have to keep kids 6 feet apart, so every other chair eating, every other chair worshiping, we've even heard things of, like, you can't put adults in with students and different, like, how do you, like, what kind of camp are we actually running? So I need to watch a little bit more of what he actually said, but I think he was a pretty bold statement to tell.
Yeah.
And again, he's in Atlanta, much different. He's dealing with a kids ministry that sees thousands of kids across multiple locations.
Yeah. And his statement, what was interesting to me is, like, because again, it was a soundbite statement for sure, but it was just like, they asked him, like, when are you going to hold Sunday services again? And he's like, when it's safe for toddlers to be in a room together, because it's like, you can't socially distance toddlers, which is just interesting. It was just interesting context. But Beck, man, what are you, like, how are you processing family stuff, man? Like, I know your guys' culture, your church is so pro family and just really try to be engaged with that. Like, what things are you guys hearing as your process, and not just about summer events, but just like, because there is this reality as we begin to reentry, like, parents are going to be worried about their kids, and kids ministry, youth ministry, all over the place. So what things how are you gauging it? What are you thinking? What are you guys feeling? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I've been hearing a lot of parents talk about not just the physical medical risks of COVID-19, but also the emotional risk of isolation. So I think a lot of our families right now are hesitant about summer programming and summer activities, but at the same time, they're hopeful that we can find safe ways to provide embodied experiences, because they know how meaningful that is for their kids. And so I think we've been hearing a lot of parents who are saying, I hope you find, and we'll help you find creative ways to get us together when it's appropriate, when it's safe, because our kids are really hoping for that.
It's great. It's great. Well, let's go ahead and open it up. What things are you thinking about? What things are you processing? Like, what did you, like, when you were up on the call, what was like, man, if I could just, I need to ask this question, that kind of a thing. Let's open it up a little bit.
Hey, I have a question. So like this is more like what would you do scenario. I'm trying to think through this and process it.
Did you say
Like,
this is a would you rather
no,
scenario?
what would you do scenario? Our governor, like on the rules they made, let's say here's just a scenario, like in July you can meet back with 50, but the kids have to be 6 feet apart. And then August you can go back to the 100 rule or whatever. And let's say your youth group's just a little bit over 50. Would you risk doing that, or would you just wait till, like, as like I want to meet with my kids so badly, but like, would you just wait till the August time when it's completely safe to do it? Like, I don't want to put anything at risk, but I have kids that are begging me to have youth group again. And so I'm like, what do? Because I don't want to turn into youth group with the 50 rule where we're constantly just policing kids. Hey, don't do that. Don't, like, it's going to be impossible to keep kids from hugging each other or whatever, like behind your back whenever you guys know all that. But like, what do? Do you wait till the August, like a month later when the stipulations are a lot more relaxed, or do you try to go as quick as you can? I'm just trying to process through that, because our online thing, we're doing youth group online stuff, but I know there's kids we're not reaching, and it's like I want to get back to reaching those kids, and so I'm really challenged with that, I guess.
The $1 million question.
Yeah.
We were dealing with that last week because we thought we were going to be coming back with a 10 limit, and we were blessed when they said 25. And so it's like, cool, at 25, I don't really have to change anything because we're starting to hit summer, so that's more a realistic number. But when we were at 10, we were like, we'll split it. We'll do a middle school and a high school. And we were even talking with some of our other ones because they knew nothing else would be back. I was even looking at probably doing 3 youth groups a week and just keeping them at 10, which is just scale it up to you. If you can split middle school and high school, or if you got to do, hey, these 2 grades this night, I'd say get it down to smaller size. I think it's more worth the risk if you can do the smaller to come back and be innovative than to wait it out longer.
Other thoughts, other input? Because I think it doesn't, for me, the value of this conversation it's not really the number of people, right? Like there's every threshold's going to have this like this pinch point moment. And so but how's everybody processing this moment? Because it's a real moment for sure.
I think that there is some wisdom in not rushing to be like the first group back, I'm just as anxious to, meet with our students, and especially since we typically attend NTS. And so, we're working on, they're going to be sending out, like an offsite version for us to do, but we don't even know what that's going to look like. I also think that having those larger conversations with the whole church, with your church, whatever your church says, whatever your lead pastor is doing, I think that that's really important too, to follow the lead of what they're doing and what they're saying. And so for us right now, we're just kind of from week to week gauging it. But I don't know, I'm not in a rush to be like that first youth group that's meeting back in person. We have talked about the idea, there's my daughter, hi. Anything that we do over the summer, trying to do almost everything outside. And we're actually having a meeting tomorrow to talk about some creative ways that we can safely meet. I think what's already been mentioned, we could have youth group, but I think, well, we couldn't right now, but if we did, are parents even going to feel comfortable sending their students? That's the other flip side of the coin. And so I think ministering to families, there are, as we've all kind of been forced to figure out, there are many different ways that we can minister to our students. And so rushing back is not my first priority, but being creative with that. So whether we're doing like a lot of small groups, so saying like, hey, tonight we're going to just have the 10th grade girls come and we're all going to hang out, not eating food together, even though we love doing that. We're like prepackaged popsicles. Those have just been some thoughts going on in my mind, but yeah, our senior pastors talked a lot about just like even the perception of other people and how that's important, people in the community. So just some thoughts.
Can I say something off of that, Zach? I was thinking the same thing, Angela. I just think that aside from the conversation of summer camp, you know, if I were to try to think what my students are feeling right now, I don't think they're wanting anything big. I mean, eventually, yes. And if that could happen, great. But they're just wanting anything, no matter how big or small it is. They're wanting any in-person connection they can have. And so I was thinking same thing, just along the small group lines of being able to just gather my 4, 5, 6 girls together and hanging out. I just don't want people to feel the pressure that things have to be normal, because they won't. Even if summer camp does happen, it won't be a normal summer camp necessarily.
Hey, you know, man.
I
just wanted to ask you.
So yeah, I don't know. I just don't, I hope people don't feel that pressure to just, you know, go back to normal when our students probably are just wanting even the littlest form of connection too.
Yeah, I'm curious. Oh, go ahead, Travis.
I think one thing, thank you, Stephen, that they talked about in our winter retreat was honor. And one thing we've been challenged is what is our leadership in regards to government, be it local, state, regional, telling us. And our pastor has pointed out to us that if you study Paul never spoke against the Roman government in regards in a negative way, and that we need to honor what our government. And so if you're faced with a question of you've got a count total on how many people can attend, in the long run, if it's dishonoring the government, does it dishonor God? And so I think that's kind of where we are basing our relaunch, reentry on in regards to what does it look like. Our governor never said churches could not meet. He just said we suggest you don't meet. And so we want to stay within that, being able to live out like Paul lived in front of the Roman government.
Random question for anyone who's kind of thinking about like phasing with smaller gatherings before you go towards your bigger gathering. Has anyone heard any thoughts or feedback just about like practically speaking where those are meeting? Because I know just during the current situation, I've heard just a lot of people are nervous about like in-home meetings, and so thinking about like have you heard anything from people about meeting at people's houses, or encouraging like a small group to meet at people's houses versus being on site or on or outside? Just kind of like, are people afraid to go to other people's houses because it's not as quickly or easily sanitized as maybe a church facility would be, or just anything along those lines? Has anyone gotten any feedback from like parents or anything on that?
Not here, but we had 4 total cases for this entire time in our area, and everybody around us, his number is the same or less. Everyone here is like, can you just let us out? It's not here. It's given a way different mindset than a place like Altoona is the next biggest city near us, 2 hours away, and they have like 200 cases where they have to actually really take everything serious. So we're more having to play like Travis was talking and inform Christians, hey, it's the Christian thing to do to respect your government right now. And yeah, it might seem ridiculous for us, but we got to respect the law because it is a Christian motive right now. So for us, yeah, all of my parents are like, when you're getting back, I want my kids out of the house for like 10 minutes, please.
Jessica, I have heard the tension that you're describing of the environment being really important for where we're inviting kids or students back into. I've heard I think it depends a little bit on your church culture, and if it's like sometimes I've heard churches that are like, if it's a small group driven church where like meeting in homes is more normative, that seems to be a little bit viewed as a little bit of a safer space than like public places per se. But if it's not, because there's other sides of that too that we got to think about. Like if we're starting to do a bunch of ministry in people's homes, there's just some accountability and things like that get a little bit more complicated as well. If we're sending a bunch of students into somebody's home, background checks, all those types of things that would have to be a part of that process to send people in their homes. So I think there is a little bit of a different safety net to host those things at the church building, which is an environment that as the ministry leader, we have just a ton more control over, with personnel, with cleanliness, with facility, with all of those things. And I think that Angela's idea of like outside stuff, I've been hearing a lot of that as well, of people just going like, we're going to meet at the church at this tree or gazebo or whatever that church facility has to offer. But I think the caution I would have for all of us is if we start pushing home gatherings, there's a different onus that we have to take as that ministry leader whenever we start pushing gatherings in people's homes. It's one thing when a home instigates that on behalf of friendship. It's another thing when the church instigates that as a form of discipleship, and who's the owner of that. And I think we just have to be aware. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It doesn't mean we can't have people in home. I just think that there's just an awareness as a ministry leader. We have to do, it's a different procedure to host things in homes. And I'm hearing a lot of like, similar to what Matthew was saying, like regionally, what does that look like? And I think honestly too, I think part of it is regional cultural expectations, which I think this is where we've got to be really good exegesis of our culture of what is reasonable, because I can say this, what was expected of me as a youth pastor in North Carolina was extremely different than Michigan, which was extremely different than Indiana, because of the cultural expectations of the actual people. The short answer, I'd go, where I lived in Michigan, going to someone's home was like, you've arrived. Like you didn't go to people's homes. Like you just didn't. North Carolina, it was so normative, it wasn't even fun. Like, it's like you just walk somebody's house and go in the house. You didn't have to knock. You know what I mean? So it's like knowing those types of things, I think about where we're ministering is crucial to know those types of things. But those are the things that I'm hearing.
Got a quick question. Zach, you outlined sort of three main like at-risk times: large group, cabins, meals when considering camp. Another one that we've found is travel.
Yeah,
and this is
sure.
the one we haven't figured out any solutions. How do you, when you're
especially if you're going away to camp?
Yeah. Anybody have any thoughts, solutions on that one?
You don't want to rent like 8 more charter buses? That's not in the budget.
Buy them all motorcycles.
50cc scooters.
Bike trip.
No, I think you bring up a good point, though. All sarcasm aside, I think you bring up a really, really important risk factor with traveling somewhere to camp. Mm-hmm. Has anybody, I mean, besides, Joel, what do you got?
I was going to make a joke. I'm sorry. It got serious about the time I was pushing the button. I was going to say snorkels out the windows on the bus. That way everybody's breathing clean air, but never mind. Big moment's gone.
Matthew, what are the things that you guys have already processed?
Which Matthew? You talking to me?
Sorry, Matt. Yeah, sorry. You're.
Oh, that's okay.
I looked at your screen.
Yeah, can I float another question and then I can kind of review?
You do whatever you want, bro.
Yeah. So we do a day camp with about 75 to 100 kids in July, and one of the ideas that we're contemplating right now, I'd love to hear some feedback, is instead of doing 4 back-to-back days, we've talked about the idea of doing 1 day per week in July for a couple of reasons. One, just as kids have been at home and not around their friends a lot, like their first immersion into like, I'm around my friends might be really challenging for 4 days straight without having routines and things like that. the other thought we had was, number one, if it goes poorly from a risk factor, we could easily shut it down week one, or we could have plenty of time to sanitize and be prepped for the next one. But I'm curious, are we actually creating other risks, unintended consequences that we're not seeing? Anybody else hearing this idea floating around? Any thoughts on that?
We actually discussed that for our VBS, about the idea of it spreading out like every other day over like 2 weeks, similar to yours. Because honestly, when we started on the VBS conversation, we had no clue where we're at. Thankfully, if we understand our governor's guidelines, which Indiana, I wish to move to your state because your governor can communicate well. But we think we will be fine if we move to August, so we're not going to really change anything up, but that's our back pocket plan, is go every other day and do it over 2 weeks, because then we can do it one day, clean the next day, but that's where we're at on our thought process.
Matt, we've been working with quite a few different organizations on one-day events. That's going to be part of our big plan, is offer the live stream using the studios and all that kind of stuff, but then also do one-day events. And what we've been finding out from all kinds of organizations is there's not the overnight housing concerns. There are those things that you just said where you can manage issues and mitigate quickly. You can use open space in a way that you can't normally in a context. That's why we bring all of our gears, like all the archery tag and all those kind of things. And so there's a lot of momentum with these one-day events. Food service can be challenging, but in a one-day event, you can do simplest, food drops that we normally would think of on a one-day event without any food prep whatsoever, with our dear friends Pizza Hut and everyone else. So they're getting a ton of traction. And so that's why we're like moving all our summer ministry teams to back and support one-day events, to bring all the gear, bring, bands, all that kind of stuff, just to be supportive. But can I show you a little funny thing, Zach, or whatever, on the outdoor? I got this texted to me at the end of Never Too Young, where a person, which I will not say their name, but in their state, it's more rural, and they were on May 1st allowed but they had people in lawn chairs in a backyard, and this was like the Never Too Young type of thing. So it's just fun. People are being creative. I think that's the beautiful thing about the church, is the most creative people in the world are on this Zoom call. You're the ones who are out there doing it on a regular basis and figuring it out. And so, and the church is beautiful that way, being so creative. So I'm learning a ton of lessons, even from what we're doing at Cypress, on how we're asking the same questions. And so I think we're going to do a massive, like a one-day event that we can do things all over the church campus. So now the money's not an issue. Now we're not out a ton of money that we put into this, because we're, there's people that are willing to give their resources for free, whatever. So there's a lot of traction in June and July, even into August.
Well, and I love what you're thinking too about the risk mitigation of it, because if it's spread out a week at a time, like you said, if something just I don't know if you guys have had this, depending on where your state is, depending on where your state is, depends on kind of how you've experienced this. I would say there is the social, and I'll use this term loosely, but the social anxiety of being at home for 4 or 5 weeks and then going to the grocery store as an adult was super trippy, let alone being a 10 or 12 or 7-year-old or who, you know what I mean? So I even think what you just even described, Matt, is just really smart of going, hey, the first time we do this, we don't know how the kids are going to react. And I think that that's really true with all of our teens, just as I think that's a really great place for us even to think about, those first few times we get people together, we're not really sure how people are going to respond. Even with all the masks or hand sanitizers or 6 feet or whatever your region is, I think that's just a really good leadership perspective for us to have of we're not really sure how these kids are going to respond. Each kid's going to respond differently. we're going to have to mitigate some things with our parents, because we all know we work with young people. We try to keep, Sally and Jimmy from making out at youth group, let alone not being 6 feet. You know what I mean? It's like, there's all these things that are going to be part of our new job descriptions that I think are just really proactive for us to mentally be preparing for, so that we can mitigate some of those things. But I think it's a super cool idea, and it gives people something to look forward to. Like, it gives you something to build into, because, and here's where we'll probably end this call, is I think now more than ever, we really have to think about, with our events, with our gatherings, even with what Matt Blackford was saying of like, hey, when do we get people together? The thing we have to always push back to is, what value are we actually trying to accomplish? What is the actual value of the gathering, of the experience, of the engagement that we're actually trying to invite people into? Because the days of just get everybody together for the heck of it, those days will be back eventually. They're not going to be back for a little bit. So it gives us a real, again, like we talked on the call last week, this gives us an incredible opportunity to really evaluate missional focus, and what is the focus, the missional focus of what we're actually trying to do, so that we actually accomplish what we're trying to do, versus just going like, let's just get, the stipulation's 25 and my youth group's 24, so I'm all in. Like, let's slow down for a hot second and go, hey, what are we actually trying to do? What are we actually trying to do? And how are we actually serving? Because how we decide these decisions are some of the most important ministering things that we're going to be doing. We're actually ministering to our people. Hear me, don't miss this. We're actually ministering to our people by the process we're leading them through of how we're making our decisions and how we're inviting them to re-engage. That's ministry. We're ministering to that. We're ministering to their hearts in that. We're ministering to their souls in that, because as we re-enter together, it's going to be super, super important, because each of these decisions is ministering. It's not the program. It's not the thing we're inviting them to. The relational experience that they're getting is ministry. That is ministry. So, we have gone over today, which I think is totally fine, because I knew some people had to jump off, which is totally cool. But Elizabeth, could you pray for us? Can I totally put you on the spot? Please tell me no. That'd be super awesome.
No.
I will not.
No. I don't believe in praying.
If you could pray for us, that'd be super cool.
Yeah. God, we are so thankful for all the ways that we've seen you show up in this season that has been filled with so much chaos and confusion and questions, God, but you are with us, and you are here, and you are present. God, I pray for each of these leaders, for the ministries they represent, God, especially in regards to so many decisions that have to be made about summer programming and what reentry looks like, God. You know that this season can be very overwhelming, and I pray just for peace and for comfort, and that we would just know that you are with us, and that you are guiding these decisions, God, that you would pray. We pray for wisdom, and we're just so thankful for all the ways you've shown up and the ways that you're going to continue to show up in our lives and in the lives of our kids and students. We love you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Love y'all. Thanks a ton. We'll be back next week for more conversations. Hit me up with any ideas that you guys have. I know we've got some more graduation stuff to talk to and stuff like that, but if there's something specific that would be most helpful, just shoot me a text or message me or whatever, because these conversations have been so fruitful and helpful. So thanks for hanging out. See ya. Oh, where's it at?